Hi everyone, and welcome to another edition of Enjoy Beekeeping. You know, the housing market is red hot, but I'm not talking about regular houses for people, I'm talking about houses for bees. Check it out. So today I want to talk to you about the housing market for bees, and believe me when I tell you, it's a buyer's market when you're a honeybee. The kind of things that bees are looking for that makes a perfect place for them to cast a swarm. So these swarm traps that you see here have about a 10-gallon volume. And I've got another video that talks about the 3 tips for hanging swarm traps, but I think I'll just cover them real quick here. So you want a 10-gallon volume. You want to make sure it's in a tree that's along what I call the bee super highway. So I want to show you this. If you look with the camera, I'm along what's called a wet weather stream. So let me turn it around. Okay, so there's Dolly enjoying this beautiful spring day. But if you take a look where I'm standing, I'm right along a tree line overlooking a field. And this is exactly what bees want. And you can see across the field, there's a fence line and another row of trees. That's also another really good place to put swarm traps. So if you're out catching swarms this year, put them along the honeybee superhighway. The bees love to travel along fence lines. They actually use some of our roads too to navigate. So when you're coming from the air and you're coming in for a landing, you're going to look for easy to identify landmarks. So power line trails are another really good place where honeybees like to fly along. It's like the interstate highway for honeybees. So if you're hanging swarm traps this year, make sure you put them along fence lines like this here. And if you can't see it, neither can the bees. So if you need to remove 1 or 2 branches, just so that it's not covering the box, you may have to do that. I had to do that with the one that I just showed you. I liked the tree because it was nice and straight, but it also I had a couple of limbs that were covering up the area that was easy for me to reach with the ladder, so I just took them off with the saw. But you want to make sure that when you set out swarm traps, if you just set one out on a rail in the middle of the field, they'll never go there. I mean, it may be 1 in a million chance of you getting one, but bees like it along tree lines here. And then when they travel back and forth foraging, they take note of places like hollows inside trees, or some kind of a shed that's been abandoned or something like that. Or maybe they found a neighbor's house along their chimney with a crack in it, and bees will sometimes go into people's houses if they can find a crack and get in the wall. So a lot of times I get calls to come and remove bees from people's homes. That's a hedgerow of privet, so you can see all along. Here's the fence line coming in, and then there's the hedgerow of privet, and then right here is the tree line. And when it rains, in the middle of these trees, there's a stream about 2 feet wide. And so here's the bees right along that super highway that they like to travel. And this is always, this has been a tree where I've caught bees several years in a row. They always seem to go back to the same 1 or 2 trees. So that's another good thing to keep in mind. If you caught a swarm in a tree, there's a good chance you're going to catch one there again next year, or even 2 in the same year. Once you take down a swarm trap and put it in your apiary, you can always come back and hang up a swarm trap in that same exact location. So that's always a good thing. So if it's a good spot, other bees have probably looked at it and they'll come back and they'll take that swarm trap. Now, maybe you see your swarm trap and you see some bees flying in and out, and you might think to yourself, hey, I got me a swarm. That may not be the case, and here's why. A lot of times bees are in shopping mode and they hadn't actually moved in yet. So the last thing you want to do is make a trip out and take down a swarm trap around sunset or a little after. Take that swarm trap home, open it up, only to find there's no bees inside. So how can you tell if bees are actually living inside the swarm trap? Well, there's a few ways. Okay, see? Now there was one bee, he just looked at it. And there's another bee That bee just went around the entire box. It went around the tree in the box. I don't know if you could see it in the video. I'm going to try to stay here for a minute. So this is a swarm trap. Now there's another bee looking, but there's no bees living here. This bee is shopping. This bee is in the housing market. You see how they're looking at the entrance, and then he didn't go in. He's just looking at the area, and then he flew away. Let's go look at another swarm trap that bees are living in right now. One of the things that you can observe is the fact that there's a lot of bees. A high amount of traffic going in and out of the box is a very good indicator. A lot of times if bees are in shopping mode, they sometimes go in and sometimes they don't, and they kind of walk up and down the outside of the box. Now there are a few bees walking around on this one, but another really good indicator is if you see bees bringing in pollen. That's a dead ringer. So if you see bees at a swarm trap and they're bringing in pollen, or if you can see pollen stains on the entrance, a lot of times depending on what's in bloom, you might it might look like somebody ate a bag of Cheetos and smeared their fingerprints all over the front entrance of the hive. That's a real good sign that you indeed have a colony living in your swarm trap, and then you can make arrangements to come out and get those bees rehomed. Now, one of my other beekeeping tips that I always like to share with people if you're trapping swarms like I like to do is, again, the bees can stay there for about 2 or 3 weeks, no problem. And it's actually more advantageous if they begin to build comb and start raising brood. That way, when you take them home and put them into a new hive, you got a real good chance that they're going to stay put, because once brood is being reared, the bees are really committed to making sure that the next generation of bees is successful. So I like to give them enough time to get at least that far along that they are building comb and they're raising new baby bees. Okay, so that's just something that I've noticed really helps anchor a colony. A lot of times if you shake out a package or shake out a swarm out of a colony that you may already have, so let's just say all you have then is the queen bee, obviously, and a bunch of worker bees. Well, if you shake them into a box, there's no guarantee that they're going to stay. A lot of times, well, not a lot of times, but sometimes they do leave. And that's real depressing when you're starting off in beekeeping, especially if you paid like $200 for a package of bees and you dump them in a box and you think everything's going to work out great. Well, they take off on you. One of the best things that you can do if you have other colonies of bees and you've got a package or a swarm that you're going to shake out of a bush or something like that, go ahead and take a frame of open brood and make sure that the queen's not on it. Just brush all the bees off, take it out, put it into the hive that you're going to shake a swarm into, and that brood will anchor that colony into the box, so you don't have to worry about them leaving. Because I caught a swarm here last year in this very same spot, I find that bees tend to go back to those same locations for swarming year after year. So I thought, well, why not put this nice cedar War hive that's just been sitting around doing nothing. Maybe some bees would like to live in here. So I've just gone ahead and set it out here. I've dabbed a little bit of lemongrass oil on it every couple days or so when I'm out here and doing whatever. We'll have to just wait and see if a colony winds up taking this War hive. But that's what a War hive is. They're just small boxes and there's no frames. There are some that have frames, but the true War hive does not use frames. And instead of supering on the top, like in the Langstroth hive, you take a honey super or 2 or 3 and you put them on the top of the brood nest. These work from the top down. So as the colony is building, when you add a super, you put it underneath. So you lift up everything and you slide another one into that spot here. And then as the bees start to store honey in the upper chambers, you would take a piece of piano wire and just gently take that wire and just saw through the box, and you would lift it off. and then you would harvest. You have to crush and strain it, and it pretty much destroys it. I think some of the newer Warray designs have movable frames just like the Langstroth hive does. But I just put this out here just for fun. We'll see what happens. Maybe we'll get a swarm, and they'll be living in the Warray vertical style hive. So let's see what happens. This is another Layens hive, and this one is also built with that same 1 1/8 inch thick plywood. So it's not quite as cozy as dimensional lumber. That's 1 1/2 inches thick. It's 3/8 shy of that, but where I live in my climate zone, I can get away with a little bit of a thinner wall. So it's still more than 1 inch thick, which is what Langstroth, I think, built a lot of his original hives with, was 1 inch thick lumber. He recommended, you know, the thicker the better, because we're trying to mimic what the bees would find in the wild by living in a tree hollow. And if you look at some photos of some of the tree hollows where bees have been removed, you can see how thick the walls of the tree are. Sometimes they're 6, 7, 8 inches thick. The one that I did, it was probably right in that zone. It was probably about 8 inches thick all the way around where the bees were living. So you can just imagine how warm that would be in the wintertime, and also how cool that could be in the summer. But heat loss, a lot of the heat loss does come from the roof, so we want to make a nice pillow top in the wintertime. We'll talk about that a little bit more in another video, but I just want to show you this particular hive is modified the way that French apiarist Jean Herpin modified his Layens hives, and he wrote about them in his book. I think it was published around 1942. So this hive, I'll just give you the quick rundown of it. It's got a brood nest of 9 frames right in the middle here. But on the sides, it's built up a little bit. So the floor of the hive for the brood nest is down here, but the floor of the hive for the honey stores is about here. So these would be half frames on both sides. So let's look inside and I'll show you that. This is their landing board. And then let me spin it around. And I'll show you inside next. Now, I love my gabled rooftops. I've got a video on how to build these too. So if you build a horizontal hive, forget the flat top roofs. You want to get a nice gable top. And I make these for mine. I love them. And I just put them on a hinge, and they're great. They're so easy to work. So just remember, when you open them, you want to be working from behind the beehive. You don't want to have it flipped around the other way, so that when you open it, you're standing in front where the bees are. So you always want it to open from behind. So that's what this one does, but let's take a look inside. Take a look down in here. And so the middle that you see, that's the brood area. And that's going to remain undisturbed. And there's the honey sections on both sides. So the whole point of this modification that Jean Herpin did was just to keep a hive where the brood nest was undisturbed. So that's the advantage of this. Now, the thing that he also noted was the fact that these hives with this modification were left in outyards where he only visited once per year, and he only harvested the honey from them, and that was it. So can you imagine, as a beekeeper, not having to be in your hive every couple of weeks, especially during spring buildup? He just let the bees do what they want. That was an undisturbed area in the middle where those where the brood nest frames were. He never touched them. If he did, I would imagine it's probably for the same reason that I do, and that is if I want to take out a frame and maybe cut some queen cells or something like that, or if I'm making a split, or I could even shake out a swarm. Usually though, it's very minimal, and that's the beauty of the whole Layens design, is that you really do not have to be in these hives all the time, especially in the spring. You could actually kick back and relax a little bit, whereas a lot of beekeepers in the springtime are trying to do swarm prevention, they're trying to sugar feed, they're trying to do a lot of things artificially, but if you allow the bees to do so in a natural way, they're going to do just fine. In fact, they're going to do better and they'll thrive rather than just getting by. So that's the Jean Herpin modification. I just had to try building it. Oh, and by the way, those insulated sections that are here where the floor is shorter, where the honey stores go, those are actually insulated with lamb's wool. And I was able to find someone locally that raises sheep, and I'm able to get some lamb's wool to insulate the hives now, which is the gold standard for insulating hives if you're an organic or natural beekeeper like I am. If any of you are interested in building this particular modification, now I'm a big believer in less is more, so the less I disturb my bees, I've noticed the better they do. And that's what apiarist Jean Herpin discovered, was that he left them alone and he only had to visit once a year, and every time he would visit them, they were doing phenomenal. Now, we do have some pests here where I live in the southern United States, and I've got the hive beetles. So I've got the small hive beetle problem, and they're very prolific here in the south. They do exceedingly well. That's the one thing that I have to monitor when it comes to my hives. But I've got a couple of ways. In fact, I'm going to show you one right now of how I control small hive beetle. Number one, you want to make sure that you have a hive that is just sealed up top to bottom, and the only way in or out is the entrance. So let me show you what I'm doing on that. I'll just close this up and spin it around so we can talk about that. So I don't know if you've looked up Guardian hive beetle entrance trap. You can just Google that. I don't get any money from them, and I'm just here to tell you what I'm doing to control the small hive beetle. So these traps are designed so that it makes it really difficult for the small hive beetles to get inside the hive. So if you've got your hive sealed up top to bottom, real nice and secure, and believe me when I tell you, a small hive beetle can get into a crack that you might not even see. So when you put your hives together, you really want to make sure that all your joints are nice and tight. If you have that down, then you can just add a couple of these. Now I've got a double landing board here, so I'm going to put these on right now. And this will make it difficult for those hive beetles to get in. Now, does it stop them 100%? I haven't seen that good of results yet. I do think they help. So because hive beetles are my #1 threat, everybody else seems to be fighting varroa. Because I allow my bees to swarm naturally, I don't really have a varroa issue. They're there, but they're under control. My biggest concern is what hive beetles can do inside of a hive, especially if they do throw a swarm and the colony's not as strong as it was before the swarm. Hive beetles can come in and start making a mess, so I want to make sure I keep them out. Now, one other thing I want to mention about these entrance traps is they also make a real good measure of protecting your hive against large hornets. Last year I had 2 colonies that were completely wiped out by those large, I think they were Japanese hornets. I know that there's been some talk in the news about the murder hornets. I don't think that these were the murder hornets, but nevertheless the hornets that came murdered all of my bees. So I found that the entrance on these is nice and small so that the large hornets can't get inside either. So this, for me, serves a twofold purpose. So it helps prevent the hive beetles from getting in, but it also keeps the large hornets out. So this is a Layens hive that I just recently built, and it's made out of plywood, but the plywood is unusually thick. It's 1 1/8 inch thick plywood. I've never seen it at a big box store, and I just so happened to get it on a trade because I do a lot of trading to get wood and lumber and building materials for all the hives that I build. So a lot of times I come across unusual things like 1 1/8 inch thick plywood. But when I made this one, what I did was I built 2 viewing windows on them, and I want to show them to you now. So these are just removable. And now I can see all the bees working in here. So you can see I've got the partition, but the bees can still get on the other side. I got to put a Swiffer wipe or two in there. They'll stay pretty much where the queen is in the cluster, but it's probably because I took the panel off that the bees are coming on this side. So I'll put it back on. All right, so we just close them back up like that. So this is the other removable panel, and there's my bees working. I really like this setup because it gives me all the enjoyment and satisfaction of seeing them at work without really disturbing them. They do see the light come in, but it doesn't really set them off too bad. But I love watching them going to work, and you can see how busy they are here. Now this is a colony that just moved in today. I just so happened to get a phone call this morning to rescue some bees from a tree that was taken down. So I got them out of the tree, including the queen, and they are going to work, and they're breaking in this brand new hive. So they're the first colony of bees that's ever been in here, and we'll be able to observe the bees all year round just by taking off the two panels and having a look inside. Well, that's it for this video, friends. I'm glad you stopped by to visit today, and I hope you enjoyed today's presentation and looking into the different variations of the Layens horizontal hives. And I hope that maybe you've been inspired in some way to either get back into beekeeping if you used to do it years ago, or if you're just thinking about starting the journey. I hope that maybe this kind of gave you some insight on different ways that you can approach the horizontal hive management system. Until the next time, friends, I hope you're having an awesome season keeping bees, and I hope you're really truly enjoying the experience. So we'll see you in the next video.